of the BWMSTR Label. Throughout that research, we have collaborated with the team Vlaams Architectuurinstituut. So I would like to start by thanking Erik Wiers, Selin Oosterlink, and Maris Wijzen, firstly for this collaboration, but also for making room for research in the architectural practice. And maybe just a small teaser, the new call for the next year is open until 20th of November. So please check the website of the Vlaams Architectuurinstituut if you would like to apply for an inspiring research project that we can work on together next year. Urban Nature has been conducted by 3 offices that are working at the intersection of architecture, urban planning, and landscape by Tantan, Follow, and Grew. They are going to explain their research and the exhibition in detail soon, so I'm not going to do it. But before that, I would like to thank Tussendoor for the co-production, and especially Guy Antoni for the precise execution of the exhibition which you see in the vestiaire. And we also thank to the structural sponsors of VAI that support our programming all through the year. And of course, I would like to thank my colleague Nino for his hard work and kindness during the overall production of the exhibition, and of course the whole VAI team, our director Sophie Decagnier, and all my colleagues who have been supporting us in different phases of the project. And tonight we are going to have kind of a 3-part event with 2 interventions from the fragments of the movie Rudelaria by Joris van Rycke. So also thanks to him for allowing us to show these fragments. The whole movie is actually available in the exhibition that you can see after. So right after this short introduction, we will see the first fragment, and after that we are going to hear the research team and the creators of the urban nature on the intersections between architecture and nature in and around the single, because they took actually this site as their case. And then we will have a short second movie fragment, and after that we are going to have Bruno Notteboom and Jolein Bergers to share their projects and reflections. And this will be followed by a short dialogue. So let's hope we end all these in about an hour. Then we can have a glass or 2 after the opening. So.
Dankzij het smokkelen van machineonderdelen vanuit Engeland werd Verviers de eerste plaats op het Europese vasteland waar machines op grote schaal werden ingezet. Op die manier startte de industriële revolutie op het vasteland in Verviers. De industrie in Verviers concentreerde zich op textiel, voornamelijk wol. Wol van over de hele wereld werd machinaal gekamd en gewassen met rivierwater. De streek rond Verviers werd tijdens de overstromingen van juli 2021 enorm hard getroffen. De humanitaire en materiële schade was niet te overzien. Extreme, langdurige neerslag zorgde voor een ongeziene massa water dat zich zo snel mogelijk stroomafwaarts bewoog. Hierbij werden bruggen, huizen, mensen en dieren meegesleurd. Tijdens de overstromingen kwam grond die al lange tijd op de rivierbodem rustte naar het oppervlak. Wat lange tijd aan het oppervlak rustte, werd deel van de rivierbodem. Rioolwater en rivierwater vloeiden samen, wat de rivier sterk heeft vervuild. Een jaar nadien waren de brokstukken van deze ramp nog overal zichtbaar. Ook tonnen huisraad en afval kwamen in de rivier terecht. Bepaalde planten konden hiervan profiteren. De zaden van tomaten kunnen perfect de menselijke stoelgang overleven. Ze hebben zich op verschillende plaatsen kunnen uitzaaien via het rioolwater dat in de rivier terecht kwam. Deze meloen zal hier op een vergelijkbare manier terecht zijn gekomen. Petunia's kennen vooral van bloempotten op balkons. Bij het overstromen van een woonwijk zal ook hun zaad in de rivier terecht zijn gekomen. Op deze plek, nabij Gaufontein, op 15 kilometer van Verviers, is er een overstromingsbekken gegraven. Hier is veel grond terechtgekomen, dat lange tijd rustte op de bodem van de rivier. Vele planten hebben zaden die makkelijk decennia tot soms honderden jaren kiemkrachtig kunnen blijven. Planten uit verschillende streken van over de hele wereld zijn hier beginnen groeien na de overstromingen. Zoals deze Sesbania uit het zuidoosten van de Verenigde Staten. Of deze hibiscus vanuit Australië. Hun zaden zijn ooit met wol naar hier gekomen. De wol werd gewassen in de rivier en ook de zaden kwamen in de Vesder terecht. Na decennia lang te overbruggen op de rivierbodem zagen ze een kans om te kiemen. Deze plant, eveneens uit de kaarsjeskruidfamilie, is verwant aan de tropische groente okra. Dat is te zien aan de vorm van de zaaddozen. Deze stekelige papaver komt oorspronkelijk uit de woestijnen van Mexico. Deze stekelnachtschade is verwant aan de tomaat. Het blad en de bloem zijn vergelijkbaar. Deze plant komt eveneens uit Mexico en het zuiden van de VS. Deze plant kent geen verwanten in onze streken. Deze komt voor in woestijngebieden in Zuid-Amerika.
Good evening, everyone. We are 1010, Grew and Follow. We are architects, space producers, with a practice that is playing on the edge of the built and the unbuilt, the interior and the exterior, the solid and the soft. We found each other in a shared fascination for the in-between space in urban environments. In our education, we were trained to understand and work with functional, constructive, and aesthetical categories of architecture and the design norms and regulations that steer a project. We learned that architecture should be in proportion with its surroundings, built or unbuilt. Yet today, we feel that much stronger forces are at play. Being raised in an almost completely man-made environment where nature was little more than a bucolic background of our living and working. we could hardly imagine that this nature would turn against us, putting our safety at risk. We became seriously concerned with the future of humanity in our planet. We started feeling hyper-responsible, realizing as we do that the construction sector is one of the biggest producers of CO2, next to be greedy for land and soil, disrupting their fragility. The climate crisis comes together with a tremendous loss of biodiversity. We feel like we cannot rest. Time is ticking. We must adapt our practices of space producers. Apart from making space for humans, we have to become more conscious about the choices we must make to nurture cohabitation. Because if the modern human cannot last, neither we will. Our future hangs from the modern human, and the modern human is awaiting our responses. But what can we do, being architects or designers of the public space? We are not full-blood activists, only sometimes on a Sunday. And we adore watching documentaries, but we will never obtain the skills of a zoologist that truly understands the life and habitats of the animals. And we admire to study the structures of plants, here so beautifully portrayed by Karl Blosveld, as a source of inspiration. But we also must confess that we will never be able to have the expertise of a botanist. In our daily practices, we are used to organize and participate in processes of co-production, where humans can speak up in order to bend the future towards their vision. We care for social inclusivity, seeking to create opportunities for those who are socially and economically disadvantaged. We try to observe thoroughly the environment we work in and measure what we can, trying to fill the infinite amounts of holes in our knowledge. These findings inform our designs. We wish we could start a dialogue with the modern human we cohabit with, so they could speak up in order to bend the future towards their vision as well. And then we were granted the label BWMSTR an opportunity to dive deeper into our collective fascination, a research track to explore the paradigm of urban nature. An occasion to find answers to the question, what is it we can do as architects to nurture the cohabitation between humans and the modern humans? Our explorations were curvy, and the answers we initiated are layered and for sure incomplete at the same time. Those who were expecting a manual on how to build urban nature will be disappointed. In the paradigm of urban nature, we architects will never hold as much knowledge of the modern human like zoologists, botanists, or ecologists ever will. Our strength can be found in the ability to link perception, imagination, and creation of a place. And we process the things we discover rather by drawing than writing, allowing us to imagine future places. A couple of examples of this ability are shown in the exposition, and I will pass a couple of these works. The first slide is a drawing of Liu Nijacmin, which has made drawings of particular places in the campus of the Singel. And I think what is the beauty of the drawings is you can see how she has been drawing with a sharp eye and an ability to show facts, both architectural facts, but also you can see the remnants of organic material in the corner of the triangle of the artificial pond. The textures and the poetry, they illustrate the wickedness of the paradigm of urban nature. There are the drawings, the axonometry of fallow, that opens up our eyes for the presence, although punctual, of animals that help us, and these drawings, they help us imagine the Singel as a habitat for modern human species. There are the soil sections of 1010 that show that urban soil is a story of a long history where human and modern human are strongly intertwined. There are the landscape drawings of Gru that present the layered environment of the Singel as a collection of habitats where humans are actually just a detail. And then there's a booklet called Perspective of Practices that show there is not one answer to the paradigm of urban nature. This is a picture sent by Bram van den Moortel of a mountain of earth in Neerpede, in Anderlecht, that has become a microcosmos of orchidea due to the fact that old loamy soil appeared on the surface. Sometimes urban nature just happens to us. There is a proposal of Thijs van Spaandonk, who built a house for bats, which is a sample of well-engineered design that serves the proliferation of one species in favor of a larger ecosystem. There's a sketch of Stijn van Reuzel, who came to the workshop we organized in September of Hop Office, a sketch that shows how an existing concrete pond could be transformed into a small ecosystem for many species. And last, this is a picture of the Eco Cathedral in Mildam by Louis Leroy, which is an exceptional example of an architectural ecosystem that truly develops a dialogue between human and more than human interaction.
So as Bert already told, we don't try to give answers, but only reveal or give another view on the urban nature, and we took therefore the building as of the single, the campus itself, as a case. And so we all know this building as architects very well, but what we try to do is to look to it from a different angle, from a different perspective, and to look to it through the eyes of some animals, some fauna and some flora, and to see how they are using this building. We did this during a masterclass in September. This is a picture of it. But we also did it by visiting the single, the campus itself, during a couple of times, also during different seasons, different periods of the year. What you can see here is us on the roof. And what we try to do is like to find traces of life, traces of animals, as you can see on the picture, but also of plants, soil, as Bert explained. And we try to find a link between them and the campus of the single. So what conditions does this building create that refer to why some animals or plants are using the building in another way than we are using, but they're also here. One of the things that was striking, for example, is this view. This view is what you get when you're really on top of the roof of the single, so on top of this building, actually. And it's not only us humans that like this view, there are also a lot of animals that like it, more specifically birds of prey, like the kestrel, the buzzard, and the peregrine, that are often visitors of this roof. They like it here because it gives a nice overview of their territory, of the single itself. They don't use it to nest, but it's more to have an overview or to maybe occasionally eat their prey. Here you see some remnants of, I don't know what, but a dead animal. Also, what we found is that the single itself is a place that also a lot of birds like jackdaws in this case. But of course, they're not always very welcome, but specifically the chimneys are a nice nesting place. The same counts, of course, for the urban pigeon. But also some more accidents happen. So this is, for example, a remnant of an art piece which was installed in the courtyard during last summer, and this remnant became a home for mason bees that were settling inside and having their home. But also some other accidents happen, like there is, of course, this beautiful pond, but also very architectural and a bit artificial. But this gives a home, a second home actually, for a lot of pets. So in this case, a koi, but also a bunch of turtles are finding their home inside this pond. It's also a hunting place for herons. And the life cycle of a mayfly is also depending on the presence of this water body. Yeah, what we did, so these are some glimpses, of course, there are many more, and of course we are not complete, but what we try to do is really to reveal how the single as a building is not only a place for humans, but it's also a kind of habitat or a place where non-humans are also present. We try to reveal it. We don't judge if the turtle is better than the peregrine or vice versa. And we also don't give an answer on how to deal with it in the future. But what we just wanted to show is to reveal this other presence and also to make us all aware of this and to see how we can take more care of this case.
We're going to de-zoom a little now. So we understood from the beginning of this research trajectory that Leon Steinen, the architect of the single, had been concerned by the fragmentation of this picturesque landscape of the Wesenberg site in which the single was initially imagined or conceived, designed, implemented, due to the works of the ring road, the train line, and the construction of the Olympic pool in 1968. So here you can see the first model or the original setting, let's say, for where the single was supposed to be built, but which was therefore completely changed over time in a very actually short period of time, just after, in the meantime of the building of the single. So if we could see the single as a habitat for others than human, we wondered what was the nature of the landscape around it. Not much that contemplated landscape as imagined by Steinen, but a landscape where entanglements would happen. So first, let's say the first exercise that we did was to represent a fragment of that green corridor that is quite fundamental for Antwerp. And despite the many infrastructure we can see, the critical mass of open space, though mainly perceived as leftovers of urbanization, is actually quite important. So we went several times on a walk around the single, and were struck by the multiplicity of biotopes that were to be found, being part of this major corridor. So I will go through them. So pictures taken in the close surrounding of the single, where we can find, for instance, the pond of the Maatswest, rail and ring embankments, the old pump station, Old Woods, here the domain Erthoog. Also, again, an embankment just by the single. Here, close to the pump station. Here, open field that is actually also ecologically maintained by the Green Services of Antwerp. Here again, kind of wild in the city. Here, the pump station, and we kind of took a look closer, and specifically focused on 8 milieus, including the single, where surveys were made, also on the occasion of the workshop we had organized in September, through kind of a closer look to these different milieus that we can find around the single, and a survey of the different species, floristic but also faunistic. And we started also working with the tools of the architect or the landscape architect, let's say, to try to represent those coexistences, and also to survey in a kind of, let's say, minimal legend first trial, As a reminder, we're not scientific. We really take the perspective of the architect that try to understand those coexistences. And we, along the research, we really try to create those 8 portraits that we could find in the surroundings of the single, that to kind of enhance those encounters between humans and non-humans, and that are definitely not always conscious or desired, but to bring that kind of awareness on what we could call urban nature.
Op het Europese vasteland vond de industriële revolutie eerst plaats in België. De steenkoolexploitatie in België is intussen gestopt. De overblijfselen zijn doorheen het hele landschap te zien. Heidegronden werden massaal bebost met dennen. Dennenhout was ideaal om de ondergrondse gangen van de mijnen te stutten. Omdat dennenhout luid kraakt voor het breekt, konden mijnwerkers een komende instorting horen. Grove dennen waren bij de eerste bomen die er begonnen groeien na de laatste ijstijd. Nadien verdwenen ze uit het landschap. Door de grootschalige plantages voor mijnbouw werd deze boom plots de meest voorkomende boom in bosverband. En dat is hij nog steeds. Terrils hebben een apart microklimaat. Donkere gesteentes waaruit ze bestaan warmen makkelijk op, waardoor het aan de grond warmer is dan gemiddeld. Door het reliëf is er veel variatie in oriëntatie tegenover de zon en verschil tussen vochtig en droog. Gaspeldoorn is een inheemse vlinderbloemige struik die profiteert van de warme, droge omstandigheden. Hij bloeit vroeg in de lente, soms zelf in de winter. Spaanse brem komt van nature veel zuidelijker voor. Dit is een van de weinige plekken in België waar hij verwilderd is. Op Terrils groeien vele planten die van nature een veel zuidelijkere verspreiding hebben. Deze grassoort, zuidelijke kortsteel, groeit in België enkel op deze Terril. Het is onduidelijk hoe hij hier beland is. Hij kan onbedoeld zijn ingezaaid. De zaden kunnen ook met industrieel materiaal meegekomen zijn uit het zuiden. Hier nog een aantal planten die uit het zuiden gemigreerd zijn met behulp van de mens. Echte salie is nog zo'n typisch Zuiderse plant die profiteert van de snel opwarmende, donkere gesteente van de Terril. De oorsprong van deze salie is te zoeken in het Middellandse zeegebied. en komt in België nauwelijks verwilderd voor. Deze terril maakt daarop een uitzondering. Ook vele inheemse planten, zoals deze orchidee, de grote keverorchis, leven op terrils. Klein hoefblad komt overal algemeen voor op sterk verstoorde bodems. Hier profiteert hij van erosie. Hij maakt paardenbloemachtige bloemen in de lente en maakt pas later blad aan. Vanaf mei staan de terrils volop in bloei. Gele en witte hogenklavers hebben terril getooid in een zee van kleur. Dit zijn kortlevende planten, die zullen afsterven na de bloei, maar niet zonder eerst een massa zaden te produceren voor de volgende jaren.
Okay, thank you. So I'm Bruno Notteboom, and this is Jolein. We're going to talk about our work. It means that I'm going to do the talking, but Jolein will participate in the discussion, but it is partly based on her work. So thank you to the organizers for inviting us. And first I want to congratulate 1010 fellow GRU and all the others who have contributed, and the team of the VAI with a wonderful exhibition about a very topical and of course important subject. What is really interesting about the exhibition, we think, is that it offers on the one hand a very situated perspective. The Singel is used as a site where new ways of looking at architecture and urbanism is tested from the lens of urban nature. And on the other hand, it opens up a whole range of perspectives by people active in the fields of architecture, designers and others. And this ranges from concrete new ways of analyzing our environments, concrete projects, and design methods to more theoretical positions or repositionings, taking into account the perspective of other than humans. And what becomes clear in this exhibition, we think, is that we are all grappling to come to terms with the question of how we designers, professionals, researchers in planning and design can engage with urban nature. And at this point, we think it's not only about formulating answers, but also about posing the right questions and to develop new perspectives. So what we want to do in our short presentation is starting from our own research to show a couple of ideas, positions, ways of analyzing and designing that we came across over the last couple of years. So I will show a couple of historical references that we study, also some recent work from our research group. So the research group I'm talking about is People, Planning for People, Urbanity and Landscapes at the Department of Architecture of KU Leuven. The intention here is not to promote our own work, and sorry if it would come across that way, but rather to formulate a couple of questions or perspectives that we might discuss about later on. Okay, so, well, people who have been in the Singel before might recognize the images of recollecting landscapes. It's a rephotography project I have myself been working on for over 20 years now with Pieter Uitenhove of Ghent University. It has been on display here also in the Singel. And the reason why I put it in the presentation is to show how the city, and in this case processes of urbanization, have a very complex relationship with nature. Urbanization is very often a process that destroys nature. It destroys habitats, it messes with the soil, it messes with the water, and so on. But on the other hand, it also forms a substratum for new types of nature that are adapted to urban situations, an ecosystem or an urban ecosystem in itself. What was interesting for us when doing this project as architects and urban planners was that it brought in new knowledge and new ways of looking at the urbanizing landscape. And the first image on the top left, an image of the cultivated landscape near the Haan, near the coast, is made by Jean Massard, who is a professor of biology at the ULB in Brussels, who we studied and who was considered to be the first ecologist in Belgium, actually. And he was very interested in the relationship between the human-made and the natural, and relationship between humans, the landscape, plants, animals, and the soil, which drastically changed, as you can see in subsequent photographs. So where first photo depicts a landscape which is inhabited by humans, animals, and plants with rather entangled lives, this relationship becomes much more complicated maybe in later photographs. And I don't have the time to go into this much deeper, but as a biologist, Massard influenced several contemporary landscape architects and urban planners who were very interested in this relationship between urbanization and soil, topography, biogeography, etc. Well, here we can also see that Massard was very much into soils, which is an important topic in this exhibition, and how soil is manipulated by humans, what are the effects on plants and animals that inhabit it in a positive and in a negative way. And well, the reason why I refer to this project, Recollecting Landscapes, is that it helped us to broaden the scope of the field of architecture and urbanism and to look at a whole range of new things, new forms of knowledge, bringing in discussions from other fields like biology, ethology, soil, water management, and bringing that into architecture and urban planning. But also an understanding of how people actually live with nature or cultivated nature in these landscapes. And it also considers discussion on landscape, nature, architecture, and urbanism to be a kind of cultural project. We have a kind of cultural role also if we're dealing with nature. And something that needs to be discussed in a kind of broader societal arena in publications, exhibitions, and debates, which is, of course, what this BWMSTR Label is doing. Okay, to continue the history class, I quickly show some other images that we came across in our research. Here we see an image of a forest ecosystem that shows the relationship between animals, plants, soil, water, etc. in qualitative and quantitative terms. It is produced by ecologist Paul Duvigneau, who was studied by Konrad Daniels in his PhD. And Duvigneau was one of the successors of Massard at the ULB. And what's interesting is that Duvigneau projected actually this scheme of the forest ecosystem onto the city, imagining the city as an ecosystem, a type of urban nature, you could say, the ecosystem urbs, kind of city of flows in which natural and man-made elements are part of one urban / natural system. But what I want to show is that he also made, or his team, they also made other types of drawings in the 70s. And he also mobilized these kind of more detailed drawings. And apart from this very large systemic studies of urban nature, he also studied soil and vegetation on specific sites in the city, here in Brussels in the Woluwe Valley. And the reason why I show this is this section is that actually this analysis of soil and plants as a kind of habitat also played an important political role. It's became a tool of negotiation to protect these habitats from kind of thoughtless urbanization that was going on in the Woluwe Valley at the time. And in doing so, new alliances between actors were made, including ecologists, but also local action groups that were working in these sites. Another example that we came across, historical example, and it was already shown before, we also find this idea of urban nature as something that is produced and negotiated by a variety of actors in the work of Louis Leroy. And these actors can be human as well as other than human. We are studying this in a PhD project Michel Mlati is working on. Leroy was a Dutch artist who developed from the 1960s onward in several places in the Netherlands participative green structures and post-war housing expansion districts. And together with residents, he shaped artificial topographies made of demolition rubble, which was abundantly available in the 60s and 70s, then covering them with soil and letting them overgrow with plants, creating new types of habitats that didn't exist before in the Dutch polder landscape. And so in these environments, the man-made and the natural were closely intertwined, using mineral elements and soil as a kind of substratum for plants and animals to thrive in. I do mention this here because for Leroy, his interventions were actually as much social as they were ecological. So it was essential for him that they were not planned top-down, but made by residents in a kind of co-production with nature. And his explicit goal was to create what he called a counterculture, working against the monocultures produced by capitalist society at the time. And the idea was that the urban nature that he would produce with his inhabitants would gradually grow, take over the city and the entire region as a kind of growing ecological network avant la lettre, but built bottom-up and co-produced by humans and nature. So, this is the last slide of my history class. But why do I tell all this? Why do I show all these historical image in the context of this exhibition? First, to show that the question of urban nature is not new, of course. Discussions on the relations between the city or urbanization in the city are recurring through history, and I touched upon only a couple of examples, but of course there are many more. And second, I think we have to broaden our scopes to other fields of knowledge. So we approach it as designers, architects, urbanists, but we also work with other disciplines, ecology, ethology, botany, biogeography, management of green spaces, and etc. But also the type of actors that know urban nature very well, naturalists, volunteers from nature organizations, and of course the people who live in these areas on a day-to-day basis and very often are very close to this nature. And I think it's great to see in the exhibition that new sites are explored, but also sometimes actors come to the foreground which we would never have thought of 10 years ago. And a third point I want to make is that this question of urban natures is not only a design question. It's very important to look at it from a design point of view, but at the same time, it's also a socio-political question. All these historical figures I mentioned were actually all active on a political level, but in various meanings of the word, in the sense that they worked with various actors, from experts to local residents, but also weighed on decision-making about the development of urban spaces. So what we want to put on the table here is that knowing and making urban nature is not only a kind of ecological, technical endeavor, but also ask questions about who this nature is for, who has access to it, humans as well as other than humans, who is involved in its conceptualization, how is it related to questions on social and environmental justice. And in the booklet with the perspectives of practices that is shown in the exhibition, this is also referred to, for example, by Gideon Boye. And I show the picture that he sent in. He shows the picture of the Josaphat Park, of people protesting against the opening up again of this car, the street that runs through it to cars again. And Gideon refers to Félix Guattari and his essay on the three ecologies and the notion of a kind of social conception of ecology. And this is also a perspective that for us is very important in the research that we are doing on more than human approaches, mostly in Brussels for the moment. And in what's left in my talk, I will give two examples of the research that we're doing. First one is the PhD research by Jolein. It's a bit uncomfortable to talk about her research while she's sitting there. She's working on the agency of more than human alliances in the context of contested sites of urban natures in Brussels. This is a map of the Green Network in Brussels, which is part of the Regional Plan of Sustainable Development. And the objective of this map is to connect urban green spaces in the city to improve human and non-human species mobility. And it's a map that is mainly the result of top-down decision-making and expert knowledge. And in her research, Jolein investigates the potential inclusion of non-experts and also of more than human knowledges and agencies. And she does this by reversing the perspective and starting from the terrain, by exploring contemporary or historically contested sites together with actors who are very close to the world of other than humans, such as members of citizen and nature associations or people who herd sheep, for example. And the research takes place through extensive fieldwork, walk-along and work-along interviews and various workshops on site. And what is at stake here is to develop what she called multi-species knowledges, which are, in contrast to classical species knowledges, much more situated understandings of urban nature, which can speak for entanglements between more than human species and their environments. Two important elements to take into account here, also for the discussion. First, I think the need for types of analysis and drawing which can grasp these multi-species relations by intertwining the lives of humans and other species in our representations. For example, as nature works in cycles and kind of in-depth understanding of temporal intertwinements could deliver new understandings, differing from classical drawings that we use in architecture and urbanism. And of course, in the exhibition, we see a lot of these kind of new types of drawings. A second important element, I think, is that we have to reflect on is the positionality of the designer or researcher within these more than human constellations. As in this case, Jolein collaborated with activist actors in the mapping of and understanding of sites. And an example is the activism around the development of the Frischjosaphat, an abandoned railroad yard in Brussels where a large-scale program of housing and other facilities is planned. But the site is also known to urban activists as a kind of urban Eden for wild bees. And so starting from the knowledges of these activists, she mapped the life world of a gray-backed mining bee, a specific type of bee which lives in sandy soils and environments which are usually not considered to be very valuable in contexts of urban planning and design, but if you look at them from a different way, they are actually very important. And this wild bee narrative was included in the Plan B or Plan B Josaphat, with multiple other design proposals by architects, naturalists, and associations calling for a revision of the development project, which can be read as a kind of contemporary counter-project. And one of the results of the Plan B Josaphat was that existing development plans were sent back to the drawing table and transformed into a plan that is, well, somehow more favorable for urban biodiversity by keeping at least a part of the site open. So what's important here, again, is that the species knowledges we are producing are not neutral, but they can lead to concrete actions which can change the politics around the site. It's not only about analyzing, I think, but also about engaging in these sites, bringing to the surface what the impact of certain plans is. And this can help to develop new sensibilities with designers and develop a kind of curiosity, which we think is also very present in this exhibition and BWMSTR Label, of course. And, well, this goes broader, actually, than just uncovering the other-than-human perspective or the perspective of animals and plants. It's about taking into account voices that are normally not heard in design and planning processes, both human and non-human. So engaging with these species, for example, also can give local residents a voice if it's well done. So an important question that always comes back in literature on post-humanism is how to give other than humans voice, as we cannot speak to animals or plants directly, of course, but well, the way we do it is to listen or try to listen very well to the humans that live very closely to them or with them. And it works also the other way around. So by putting animals on the forefront, other types of humans, the non-experts, do also get agency. So this is a kind of story of entanglement and what is often called distributed agency that we are trying to develop. Okay, so and as a last project, I want to discuss very briefly Cohabitat. It's a project we're working on that is funded by Innoviris Brussels, and it builds further actually on the research Jolein is doing. And in this project, we basically reverse the perspective of urbanism and ask the question how we would imagine and design the city from the perspective of animals. And the research is part of the PhD of Björn Brakke, who is the main researcher here, and it's developed with colleagues of UC Louvain and different experts and local actors. So I don't have the time to go deep into it, and it's still very much work in progress actually, but the idea is to develop a kind of atlas that can be used by anyone who wants to understand the city from the perspective of animals and how they cohabit with humans. So it's basically meant for designers and planners, but also policymakers, developers, naturalists, and citizens, of course. To do so, we work with what we call at the moment cohabitation narratives, in which we look at what spaces mean for species in the light of a specific way of cohabitation between humans and non-humans. One of these narratives is, for example, urban nature as a kind of resource, both for humans and other than humans. So here it's projected on the case of Marais Wils. Another narrative is the one on urban nature as a kind of refugium, also both for animals and humans. Refugium is a term that comes from Matthew Gandhi's book, Natura Urbana. And in the case of urban nature, this is also a refugium not only for certain animals, but also for homeless people that appear in this drawing. So it's an invitation to look at where entanglements between a city, the urban and the natural realm can already be found today, but also an invitation to a broad range of actors to discuss what the future of certain sites can be from this perspective, and which policies should be developed and how they affect humans, both humans and animals living there. Okay, so to conclude, and I included a drawing from the exhibition in our work, but also, of course, I think this counts for the exhibition. We are investigating the role and positioning of the architect, the designer, the planner, but amidst all kinds of constellations of human and other than human actors with different backgrounds, expertises, desires, and so on. And we do this by opening up collaborations and new sensibilities and ways of understanding that can change the future of the places we all live in. And just as a last thought, which is about the narratives or the stories we produced, we think it's very important which stories we tell about these places and their inhabitants, in words as well as visually. And an important concept in the literature on post-humanism is storying, which means developing stories not only on or about plants and animals, but trying to do that with them, which is, of course, a big challenge. And we think, of course, that the exhibition that opens tonight brings many perspectives to the table on how we as designers and planners could think about that. Okay, thank you.
Yes, super. Okay, good. I have a few questions, and I'm sorry, none of you were prepared for them. So some of them are a bit more philosophical, I would say, so I'm going to start with the more practical one. So reading the urban context with a more than human perspective, that's what actually you did for the single here. Then actually how can this become really something that informs the design process? So can it become something just more than a methodology to do a kind of an analysis of the space? Like what is next? Mm-hmm. How does it really, how can it really be interpreted in real life in an architectural urban planning or landscape design project?
Who wants to start? I start. Yeah, I mean, I think what we understood from the diverse interventions is that there is no single way of doing that. And this is very important. And the second thing, what we attempted in this exhibition was very much to open the Pandora's box of the many possibilities that exist to bring in this knowledge into the discipline of architecture. I think what is very important for us was to say, okay, we are not gonna become biologists or we are not gonna become ecologists, but we want to enlarge the way we know our environment. And by enlarging the way we know it, we can integrate new dimensions into it that were not previously there. And indeed, this includes, excludes, is a political decision. It's not just, it's a kind of a process of mediation that you have to enter in, because you cannot know everything and you cannot make place for everything that is there. Yeah, finally there is some form of selection, voluntary, involuntary, in the way you create places for cohabitation. That's also very important. But I think first of all was kind of, okay, starting from architecture, we see that since we were trained as architects, a lot of things have been integrated into this discipline of architecture. So we talk today about reuse, we talk about salvaging materials, we talk about the importance of the past, of bio-sourced materials, and then this urban nature is yet another layer that you can integrate also in what you do. But I mean, I think it's very nice that maybe Jolein, yeah?
What to me is also important in that reflection is not only the how, but the when do we integrate this other than human perspective. So, like, okay, my limited experience as an architect in combination with the research, like what it learned me is that frequently when it comes to development of buildings, of architectures, a reflection about nature comes a little bit later in the process. I think it's part of the type of brief which is being described, so I think this was also one of the comments in the perspectives from practice. So one of the participants also said, yes, these intentions should be included earlier in the process. And I think, so the when is really important. When do we bring this voice in the best or worst possible way? But yeah, also I think what I also see is that sometimes there seems to be like landscape projects or architecture projects or urban design projects, and actually when you really look at the more than human, which is for me really about relations between the human and non-human, and to really start from that double perspective, that all these types of thinking about design come together. And so there's also really a challenge in the when in the process, but also how we conceive the project itself. Yeah.
No, maybe I just wanted to react on the notion of time, because here we had the luxury to take our time to discuss, we met a lot of time. I think we did the label in a year and a half, really, we didn't work for a year and a half, but we had the time to really kind of think also into the question that we kind of pose. But when we're in the frame of a project, and there I speak from my own practice also, there's very little time to really gather real knowledge about the sites. And also often not so much knowledge gathered before by the maîtrise d'ouvrage or the clients or and there's really therefore I think there's a need to develop more knowledge, and I think the research that you showed is fantastic for that also designers could really get all that material to work upon, and that should be done for many places, not only also the precious places, but also the more common places in urban situations, I think.
While Bruno was giving the presentation, he mentioned at a point this kind of perspectives wouldn't be there like 10 years ago. which I find interesting in the sense that also this kind of duality between artificial and natural, architecture versus nature in a way, has become in a way absolute, in the sense that there is almost no place that you cannot find human traces on the planet. So, and also many different actors have also joined the discussion, both from the citizens, organizations, or scholars from different disciplines, to this whole intersection between architecture and nature, I would say. So is there some kind of a change happening in the way we kind of consider this duality, maybe?
Yeah, I think it depends on which field you look at. So I think there is in the academic field, in academia, this discourse really pervaded academia. But I'm wondering how much it already pervaded practice. So we do have the luxury in academia. It's very difficult to find the money, but once you have it, then you have like long-term projects, so you can really reflect on it deeply. You can develop it over years. You can combine historical research with more theoretical research, with more activist research. In the case of Jolein. So there, I think it's in several theoretical fields, it's already present, this idea that the natural and the man-made are intertwined, and also there's a lot of work on post-humanism that is quite philosophical. But I think whereas the big gap right now is the direction, the connection with design. Because in the design field, it's very often a very technical thing. It's very often very quickly about making holes in buildings where then birds can nest, or vertical gardens and so on. So there's still a kind of space, and I think this exhibition is a very important element in it, to see it as a kind of cultural project that pervades not only in a very practical way the practices of architects and urban planners, but also in a kind of very broader way. And maybe also the commissioners, because I can imagine that in the practice you have very little maneuvering place. Everything has to go very quickly, and it's almost out of your own interest that you go deeper into these things. But I think we should have it more zipped through on other levels also, that it becomes more important from the start. By not only working on the response, but also on the question side. Yeah. I'm not sure whether that is an answer to your question.
Yeah, I think I completely agree with that, Bruno, because now what happens a lot, I think, in the three practices that we have, is that indeed it becomes as a sort of a side thing, because you're interested in it, that we include it also in the design. And then I refer to to some work that is done as a PhD for Bruno. There is this atlas coming for Brussels, and so we used the fact that maps are existing of where some habitats are today. Makes it possible for us designers to bring it already on the table at the first discussions with the commissioner. So to give a concrete example, we have a project in Neder-Overheembeek, so in the fringe of Brussels. And so because of this atlas, we know it's a very important spot for amphibians. So we can take it into account. And so I think it's more this kind of awareness and to take it into account that becomes important, not really designing a sort of new architecture where also these amphibians have then a place in holes and etc. So that's, I don't think, is the case that we have to design like a sort of a new home for them, but more to take this into account, be aware of the fact that these non-humans are also there, and how you can steer your design or the positioning of a building, for example, on how you can take it in that sense into account. The fact that, so I think that's the most important step for us designers, I think, is to become aware of these other perspectives and how you can take them into account rather more than really make a sort of a mini house for them, because then it becomes very anecdotal. Which often happens now in this discourse. I mean, there are different kind of ways on how to deal with it, with this kind of design.
Yeah, I don't know, perhaps just a last small reflection upon that. I think what we also see in our practice is that we as architects, we are often working on the smaller scale, while, for instance, if you look at biodiversity atlases, etc., they often skip the urban environment. They don't give it any value. It's white. And it actually makes it super fascinating then to be able to act in this urban environment and perhaps be the first one to anyhow recognize, like, hey, there is something here. Why did nobody tell us that? And I also remember something very interesting insight we got from the workshop we did the 15th of September of Rycke, who said in the end, like, yeah, this urban nature is by default something very hybrid. And, it's something, it falls outside the traditional categories of how to understand natural landscapes or natural typologies. And again, perhaps this dirty or this messiness this urban nature has, again, makes it an interesting starting point, perhaps again for us architects to start from there and to see how it can interact with the adaptations we start making into particular spaces, not only for a kind of a more human use, but also for the development of new non-human qualities.
As a last question or comment, the kind of the socio-ecological perspective on these projects, because the nature in the urban areas is always considered as a very valuable resource, all the while there are also some other needs and priorities. How to deal with this kind of it comes back to this kind of same duality, maybe. How to deal with this kind of contestation in a very I think concrete example of this Josaphat site in Brussels, where they want to build social housing on a formerly industrial field, which has become a kind of a haven for biodiversity over the years. So how to tackle this from a design perspective? Yeah, maybe the question is wrong, but I would rather kind of try to keep it in a kind of an architectural or designerly way.
I feel addressed. Context specific. The Frisch Josaphat, for me, it's not an or story. So, like, I think the biggest mistake is to put it as if it is or nature or or it is a natural cause or it is a social cause. I think in the end, and this is beauty about design, when you start looking at specific sites with specific histories and specific potential futures, there's always like 10,000 ways out or other ways. So I think this is why design should really be involved. And I think one of the issues with places like Frisch Josaphat is that it's being narrowed down to categories, discussion about categories and not about actual spatial design. But then, like, when we go beyond that, also within the nature, there's also a lot of social questions. So I think one of the issues maybe today is like a reflection about nature is being considered like, this is for the ecologist, or this is like someone with a specific expertise who should think about it. But like, yeah, this is really not the case in the city. So for me, the beauty about the question of urban nature is that indeed, because now we're talking like, yes, the designer, he or she is missing certain expertise in order to engage with it, but the same goes for the ecologist or the biologist working in the city, trying to think about its future. Yeah, they also really need a designer or like someone with a social, like humanities expertise to make a good reflection about that. So I find like in this reflection about urban nature, we are really scratching the surface, and we really need to go much, much further. And in this reflection, it's not only the ecologist, it's also really the designer, urban designer, architectural designer. Also, and we have to really be careful about not opposing these categories, because, well, of course, each side has a story, so we have to discuss each separately. But in the end, like the ecological agenda includes the human for sure. So there's no opposition. This is maybe a bit too political, but that's my opinion.
Yes, no, I don't have much to add, but I think what is very important also in relation to what Bert was mentioning of the messiness of the urban nature is that when we try to create these kind of fake oppositions between claims in the city, is that we forget that the cities also have inherited a series of environmental injustices, and that we have to correct them. So it's not just about now we cannot build social housing on this wasteland plot, but it's rather the question is, what about all the environmental injustices that the city has accumulated? How can we cope with that before building the new social housing? Actually, so I think there is a big project of restoring this relationship, and also bringing some fairness into the city that we have inherited before introducing new fake oppositions, I think.
Yeah, but it's really not so easy to take questions on this space. Maybe we can meet them.
Yes.
Yeah.
If someone, because I guess all these people, they also have.
Cannot see that. But maybe yes.
There is a question.
As someone who happens to work in this building, but also live not far away in the area that you researched, I was wondering how you encountered species that are closely related to humans. Actually, like for instance, not far away from here, there's huge infrastructure for dog walking. In the Mastfest Park, there's this flock of geese that is quite present. There's also this flock of canaries that you see multiple times a day. Yet I was just wondering do these kind of species that have a very close relation to the people who live here, domesticate them, animals? How did they appear in this research?
We didn't focus on them particularly, I would say. They were part of the many spaces we kind of identified or collected. And after, I think it's more on the building of the single that we actually focused more on the relation and on those close relationships. I think on the larger scale, it was. Of course, we saw that dog running place and other the other one you mentioned. But yeah, for us, it's more as a kind of observation than actually, yeah.
Okay. Yes. No. I think what I remember very vividly when we started this research and we came for the first time here, and we had an interview with the manager of the single, and it was overwhelming because he could spend an entire afternoon telling us about these multiple entanglements, about the chickens, the rats, the turtles, the processi roops. So it was a trip in a way. So I think what is very important is that we did not came as experts trying to make the inventory of a species, but we tried to listen to the people who are using this building and trying to discover with them the traces that all these species left or leave actually in the single. but it was very much through the stories that we heard, and also our attention, our focus was very much defined by that. So again, the sociological approach is not about we come in a couple of days in a year. Is obviously not enough. So you need to talk to the experts who inhabit this place and who tell you about, I saw, or even the picture of the heron, it was you who sent it. so yeah. But it's also about creating alliances with inhabitants, with the local experts, with the other species and humans.
Yeah, and I think we also, through the course of the research, we didn't build, as we're not scientific, we didn't build like or entomologist, or we didn't build like a strong opinion on exotic, invasive species. For us, we're curious about it a bit, again, about that dirtiness that actually urban nature bring in cities.
But we were to build on that, we were very surprised when we started working in various projects with ecologists. We thought, okay, now we are going to bring the scientific voice in, and they're also grappling in the dark sometimes. So we thought, okay, this is, they know everything about a certain species, but then it's also very much for them almost a kind of negotiation among one another. Well, I think this species might come in, but maybe it's better to do that. And so it was very surprising to see that something like exact science, it's almost like design. It's like you can have a kind of idea or a hunch where you're going, but you don't know exactly. And for them, it's also trial and error. If they project a certain, want to develop a certain habitat, there are a lot of uncertainties. So maybe they're not so far from, their way of working is not so far from the way we work as designers. Yeah.
Yeah, and there I also see like a very important gap or challenge in the context of a design project, because when you look at the types of ecological, like environmental data, which are all the time accessible, are most of the time on a rather large scale. They're not on the scale of your plot that you are working on. And so one of like a very important challenge is indeed the collection of data on the scale of this project in the kind of temporality that you are then working in. And also again there, these reports that we are producing, these studies that we are making, they will never be able to fill that gap, because if you want to measure everything about our environment, like this data is endless. So you really need to step in and step to the site and accept that you don't know what is living there. And for me, this is like super important. The first thing like we can do is just to enter a site on which you are working and accept that we don't know it and that we will try to explore, and that our exploration will never be enough. But that is like a kind of attitude that we could start with, and that would already be an enormous change. But then, of course, indeed, like you said, there's reality of the project and the time given and all these things. But so for me, like in the context of a project, there's really a challenge on how to collect data on that scale and bring it into the design process. Yeah.
Very good remark. So because when you bring nature into our discipline, it's more thinking in processes rather than in end results. We are very much used to thinking, you deliver a building or master plan or whatever, but when you're working with nature, it's a kind of continuous thing. And we're actually not equipped to do that. The most commissions are not built that way. You know, it's finished, but it's not. It just starts. So, indeed, I think design could learn a lot from management. Well, management in the sense of green management and following up, and which is kind of continuous process. Yeah. Well, it's not actually an answer. It's confirming what you put to the table, but I think if you don't have an answer how to do that, it's always,
We can talk about it later.
Can we continue this conversation at the vestiaire, looking at the exhibition and with some drinks? Then we can have more informal talks. Thank you very much for joining us tonight in this catastrophic weather. It's very nice to see too many people joining us, and thank you all very much for this, for the exhibition and for the talks tonight. Thank you.